Hey guys, welcome back to more mother-in-law stories. In the first one, my future mother-in-law lied about a medical emergency to steal our wedding fund, and in the last one, I got my future mother-in-law fired from her job for trying to kill me. Let's dive right into the video. So I really thought that I was gonna like my mother-in-law. I thought that everyone's stories about how horrible people's relationships are with their in-laws had to be exaggerated. And well, maybe they are in some cases, but in the less fortunate cases, it is so much worse than you could ever hope to understand from the descriptions. Or at least it is when things start out with your significant other not understanding the toxicity of their family, which I think is understandably common. I love Mark, and I don't think he would be blind to the behavior in any other situation, but because it was his mother, he just couldn't see past the family bond. I guess technically, she was not my mother-in-law yet, but that is more concise than mother of my fiancé, and I'm not about to add the soon-to-be before every MIL. So yeah, anyway, I was very patient with mother-in-law early on. She obviously did not like me, and early on I thought it was as simple as her not wanting to give up on being the most important woman in her son's life. For much of the dating period, we did not necessarily spend a ton of time with her since Mark had moved to a different city after school where he met me. Any of these times that we did meet, I tried to be forgiving, but it got harder as time went on. I could not understand how the woman that was starting to become a parent with more time could possibly be the same woman that Mark spoke about in stories of his life. The most consistent flaw I could catch in the stories he told was the fact that she tended to spend a little more than she should to stay financially responsible. Basically, she had been known to go on to trips beyond her means, and Mark always claimed that no one was ever sure where exactly she got the money from, but she managed it. Well, almost 5 years went by, with my opinion of mother-in-law steadily trending downwards before Mark proposed to me. We had started a small joint savings account before the proposal, but we both had lavish dreams of what our marriage ceremony should be, so we are gonna take our time saving for it. While we were engaged, I actually wanted to put more time into getting to know my mother-in-law, so I planned plenty of opportunities for me to interact with her and the rest of Mark's family. The first hint I had that something was more seriously wrong was the expenses that must have been accrued for just the engagement celebration. I asked my mother-in-law to plan it, and when I showed up to a reserved country club with cooks personally cooking for the guests, this is on a teacher's salary. I'm not in the finance field, but I've always been someone who saves for vacations or events, so I'm well aware of just what kind of costs could accrue. I assumed that this mystery fund mother-in-law was pulling money from was some kind of savings she had for her vacations as well, but enough odd comments and passing conversations led me onto a different trail. I ended up finding out that the last huge vacation mother-in-law had gone on just so happened to be from her taking out a loan. This loan would have been one that stuck around a bit longer if she had not blackmailed a nephew into paying it off. I was surprised that Mark's cousin was willing to share the awkward situation, but I appreciated it for the warning of what I was getting into. It started to become more clear to me when Mark was avoiding delving deeper into topics involving his mother to avoid talking poorly of her. Ultimately, this desire to forgive was what caused the situation that brings me here today, but I don't blame him. He's a good man who wants to believe the best about people, and that's one of the things I love the most about him. Through smart savings, we accumulated around $89,000 for the wedding. I did not want my mother-in-law to know, but Mark let it slip when she pressured him. She often made comments that nothing less than a royal wedding would be good enough for her son and managed to suggest expenses that were far beyond even our substantial budget. We had paid a few deposits and set a date when I had a business trip that took me out of the house for a long weekend. I know mother-in-law was aware of this and used this against Mark to make it easier to manipulate him. While I was gone, mother-in-law called Mark in a panic. She claimed that the government vaccine had caused heart issues and the doctors said that she would need an open heart surgery urgently or risk death. She claimed that due to a lapse in her insurance, the doctors told her that she would need $80,000 cash to operate in time. All this surely sounds like Swiss cheese from a distance, but if your mom was hyperventilating and panicking, then you would probably be liable to do what you could to help as long as you are not estranged yet. Well, Mark made the transfer and left our savings account in shambles. I got home from my long weekend and knew that something was wrong the moment I walked into the house. Mark was practically a vegetable in the living room and the house was in shambles compared to how we keep it, not just because I like it, that man is anal retentive. I asked what was wrong and tears were already flowing. At this point, he still thought his mom was getting an emergency surgery, but when he looked in my eyes, I think he saw past the rose tint in his glasses and was so sure that he had done the wrong thing. He starts going on about how mother-in-law had brought up family duty and told him that she would die without it. She cried and begged and groveled, and he didn't know what else to do. All this came out in a jumbled stream, and I still didn't even know what was going on with mother-in-law or the money. Then he finally said, "I gave mom the money." Of course I asked what exactly he meant, and he was finally able to explain the situation. I immediately held him and made it clear that I could care less about the wedding if his mom was on death's door. I told him that I only hoped he would forgive the same from me if I needed to save someone I loved. He calmed down a bit and more details came out in a much more understandable manner. Which actually did start to make the situation worse as it unfolded in front of me. "Have you visited her?" He sniffled and shook his head. "I wanted to see her with you." "Where is she?" He looked so confused for a second and my slight doubts bloomed into suspicion. Mark started to panic when the hospital his mom has always gone to did not have any record of a surgery for her. I was calmer as I contacted more hospitals, but I think it was mostly because I had already accepted how I thought this was going. Mother-in-law certainly was not in any of the hospitals, but she also was not at home. When Mark found out that he had been blocked from her social media, we made a random account and found her social media. It was flooded with pictures of her flight and landing in Hawaii. I was livid, but honestly more concerned about Mark and the disillusionment that came with this betrayal from his mother. I know a thing or two about investigations and I kept digging to find where exactly all our money had gone. If it weren't enough that she was wearing plenty of jewelry and designer labels in her social media pictures, then it certainly got worse when I found out that she was a regular at the local casinos and seemed to have an extreme gambling addiction close to home. I can only assume the same thing is what brought her Hawaii trip to an early end and had her flying back home to find me and Mark in the airport. The denial mother-in-law attempted in our face while wearing proof of her betrayal was laughable, but it fell apart when she saw just what this had done to Mark emotionally. Then she had plenty of excuses of debt she needed to pay off, and she even whispered and implied that she needed the money to pay off a loan shark who actually might have killed her if she did not pay up. She even claimed that the wedding itself was the stressor that caused her to do this. Did not matter what she said though. Mark had already lost the illusion, charges for fraud were filed, and she told us she would plead guilty in order to hope to atone and eventually be able to know us again after all of this. Mark was stone-faced in her offer, but she did at least hold to her word. I don't know that Mark will ever end the estrangement between them, but I do know that it is more than likely than if she had dragged the trial out for months or even years. I would rather we never speak to her again, but it is Mark's decision, not mine. Along with her jail time, mother-in-law was ordered to repay the stolen money, but we both know that unless the state pays us, we are not likely to get the money back. Which is ultimately fine because after the situation we would have wanted to postpone the wedding too. We wanted to focus on healing. We've been married now, but it was a small, intimate wedding and I wouldn't trade it for the world. We still have not reached out to mother-in-law and most of Mark's family is somewhat in the dark, but we keep in touch with those that are most important to him. Maybe one day, if mother-in-law can prove she has actually changed, Mark will reach out again. And yeah guys, if you thought that first mother-in-law story was crazy, just wait. Our next one is about a college professor mother-in-law who tried to kill me just because I was dating her son. It is titled, "Am I the a-hole for getting my future mother-in-law fired from her university position after she made our lives hell?" So 2 years ago, I met my now fiancé James, 28 male, in one of my university classes. The twist, his adoptive mother Susan, 52 female, was my lecturer. I did not know this when we started dating. We met at a campus coffee shop and hit it off immediately. James later told me that Susan, who is actually his biological aunt, had taken him in when his parents abandoned him at 14. She claims she adopted him, though he has never seen the paperwork. Everything was fine until we told Susan about our relationship. That is when things went completely off the rails. At first she tried to play nice and invited us to dinner to discuss things. I have a severe allergy to peppercorn, both black and white pepper, which both James and her husband Tom made very clear to her. Instead of respecting this, she served pepper-crusted turkey, insisting I was just being fuzzy. I didn't eat it, but just sitting near it triggered my allergy. When I started having trouble breathing, I reached for my EpiPen. Susan actually grabbed it from me and refused to administer it, asking instead if I was sure about not breaking up with James. If Tom had not walked in right then and there and helped James get me to the hospital, I honestly don't know what would have happened. That was just the beginning though. When Susan found out I was pregnant, she completely lost it. She started stalking me around campus, following me to doctor appointments, breaking into our apartment. She somehow got copies of our keys, going through our personal belongings, throwing out my food and drinks during lectures, stopping class until I would leave, trying to reschedule my exams to make me fail, and impersonating me to try to cancel my medical appointments. The final straw came when she tried to hit me while I was 7 months pregnant. We got a restraining order and moved across the country, leaving everything behind. We changed our numbers, emails, deleted social media, everything to keep her away from us and our future child. Here is where I might be the a-hole though. Last week my friend from university contacted me saying Susan was up for promotion to head of department, the dean was collecting student feedback before making the decision. My friend gave the dean my new number with strict privacy protocols in place. When the dean called, I told her everything, not just my story, but how Susan had treated and threatened another student's academic career for dating her biological daughter, and how she had abused James growing up, just everything. James joined the call when he got home and added even more incidents that I had forgotten about. We provided evidence, security footage, dates, times, witness statements from other students, and documentation of the restraining order. The dean was horrified. The university board unanimously decided to fire Susan instead of promoting her, and here's where I might really be the a-hole. Susan has worked at this university for almost a decade. This was her dream job and she will probably never work as a lecturer again. The stories about her behavior have spread through the whole town, and even her husband is filing for divorce. She's basically lost everything. I did not lie or exaggerate anything, I just told the truth about what she did. But I can't help wondering if I went too far. James says I did the right thing, but Susan did raise him after his parents abandoned him, even if she was abusive. So Reddit, am I the a-hole for getting my future mother-in-law fired by telling the dean about her behavior? And by the way, about the EpiPen incident, I'm severely allergic to peppercorn, as in salt and pepper. It's just so severe that just being near large amounts can trigger a reaction. And yeah guys, let me know what you think about this story in the comments. Do you think OP was the a-hole here or not? Let me know what you think. And the next one is a malicious compliance story. I work in a food catering place which can fulfill allergy-free requests. We have the expertise and care not to include allergic food either as a hidden ingredient or by accidentally sharing contaminated utensils and pans while cooking. In our experience, the four most common allergies are peanuts, tree nuts, eggs and milk. Cooking meals without these four ingredients will usually satisfy everyone at an event. We had a new client, a food allergy advocacy group. They ordered a large catering last month and did not pay us since. We were out of pocket $2,000 and were considering legal action. This charity had the nerve to place another order with us, but this time a smaller one costing only $450. The group asked for the meals to be nut-free vegan instead of nut, egg, milk-free, as this would ensure them a peanut, tree, nut, egg and milk-free event for cheaper. Basically, as they would avoid our additional allergy-free preparation fees. This was reckless behavior from the advocacy group, as the party attendees were most likely anaphylactic to milk and egg. Think deadly peanut allergies but for dairy, milk, cheese and cream, and egg products instead. Had we not known that they were a food allergy charity, then we would have not taken as much care in ensuring the meals were egg/dairy free and would have just focused on the nut-free angle instead. There was one important thing that charity forgot. It's now possible to buy dairy which is made from lab-grown milk from yeast. The protein is identical to milk, but it's technically vegan. We cooked all the meals with this lab-grown dairy and loaded it in the van. Upon arriving to the function hall, we informed the charity organizers that the meals had lab-grown dairy in them. The charity owner started blasting off on how it was meant to be dairy-free and how they have people deathly allergic to milk in the event. I simply explained that the order was nut-free vegan since we used lab-grown milk and that they had failed to pay us the last order and that this was simply gonna be our team Christmas party if they didn't accept the order. The owner went ballistic and began pushing me, the rest of us restrained him and the function hall had called the police. The owner lied and told the police that we had dropped and assaulted him. The police asked the function hall for the CCTV and then moved us both along. The police did inform us that at the commotion that we could head down to the station tonight and provide a witness statement should we wish to press charges. A few moments later, the owner called and begged for an apology and offered to pay us both the original and today's invoices right there and then. I decided to take the apology and the cash. Our team had a nice pre-Christmas party with the vegan lab-grown dairy meals. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. So I had several changes in my life happen all within about a month of each other. First, I ended up buying a car that I always wanted, a bright red sports car. I remember being little and riding around it once with my uncle and always wanted one like that since. I also moved into a new apartment complex, which I like due to some perks like having a parking spot in a lot and not needing to park in the street, which in my city can sometimes be impossible. The only thing I was nervous about was that there was an HOA, and when I brought up that hesitation to the super of the building, he told me that I did not have to join the HOA and it was very laid back anyway. So I now had a new car that I loved and a pretty decent apartment. It was the first day of me living there when I got stopped by a woman that just looked like a picture of Karen was in the dictionary. The haircut, the entitled look on her face, excessive makeup, etc. She started asking me why I was not at the HOA meeting that day and she had never seen me before. I explained that I had just moved in that day, so I wouldn't have known about the meeting, and also that I did not have any interest in joining the HOA. She went from smug and talking at a normal volume to yelling and raging about me being extremely disrespectful. And that she was the HOA president and I was acting like a child not wanting to be a part of the community. Just going from 0 to 9,000 over me saying a single sentence. Thankfully I managed to get away from her and was ticked off that my super clearly lied when he said the HOA was laid back. This lady was insane and looking back she might have quite possibly been drunk as well. I cannot say for sure. Anyway, things got worse the next day when I went out to my spot to find it totally empty. My car was gone and I knew in my gut that Karen had done something. I approached her. Me, did you do something with my car? Karen, oh, that red eyesore? I had it towed last night for being parked without a permit. She was smugly smiling at me and I was enraged. Yes, it did not have a permit because I was still getting one for the lot. The super said it wouldn't be a big deal since all towing requests had to go through him and he knew it was legal. Me, the super towed it? Karen, no. I did not tell him anything. I just had it towed myself once they saw that there was no permit. Me, get my car back now or I will report you to the police. You stole my car. What is the name of the towing company? She did not answer and instead got in her own car and drove away. I managed to get her phone number from my neighbor and called and texted her trying to get her to give me my car back. She did not respond to anything and blocked my number, so I could not contact her. I did not want to go to her door because I knew that could look bad for me if she called the cops. I tried to file a police station report that Karen stole my car, but it was not really possible. I had no proof it was Karen and they cannot arrest and convict somebody without evidence. The best they could was put a bulletin out for my car. They went to Karen to cover bases, but she of course denied involvement or even knowing that the car was mine. I called all the towing companies in the area and not a single one was involved or could help me. Hope was seemingly lost, but I managed to see that another car facing mine had a dash cam, so once I found that neighbor and begged him to check and see if it was caught, I found my proof. He keeps that camera on even when parked in case somebody hits him in the lot. The video showed Karen standing there and pointing out my car to a tow truck. A private one, so that was why no company I called was involved. I went back to the police with my new evidence and they were able to detain Karen based on that. They were asking her why she lied about involvement the first time. She just started screaming at the car was an eyesore and I was not following her HOA rules. Also that I had to listen to her and she couldn't be arrested for just enforcing the rules. I did not check, but I can be sure that there's no legal HOA rule that gives her the right to just tow my car and refuse to let me gain ownership back. While she was being arrested, she was trying to make a phone call with the police trying to stop her because she was actually under arrest. with her screaming that she had to call her cousin and for the police to get their hands off her. She was being read her rights in the parking lot when out of nowhere a flash of red came into the lot. It was my car with a different license plate. The guy came out and went to where Karen was being arrested and started screaming at her, telling her that he wanted his money back and just pissed that she sold him a stolen car. I guess she called him to come with the car, hoping to avoid an arrest that way, because she started telling the cops it wasn't stolen because it was right there. She was still resisting arrest and now trying to say that her cousin should be arrested because he was the one with the car. She did not want to go quietly at all, and more people were gathered to watch the spectacle. Eventually they did get her arrested but had to take my car because it was now evidence in a criminal case too. The DA would charge her with grand theft auto. Now her cousin was not getting charged with anything because police really do think that he was tricked and willing to testify against Karen in court to say that she sold it and told him that she had gotten the car cheap at an auction. And of course, grand theft auto here is a felony, and between testimony and the video evidence, she did not have a chance in hell to get away with this. She pled guilty to avoid a worse sentence and ended up getting 2 years in prison. She also was forced to fully financially compensate me for the car, which might not make sense since I did get the car back in the end. The thing is that once a car is stolen, it can lose up to like 40% of its resale value. That's a harsh hit, and because of it, Karen had to give me money. I also want to point out that the insurance didn't get involved because I held off on that since I was hoping to get Karen the way I did. They were told afterwards that it is attached to my car that it was a stolen and later retrieved car. Before we end the video, I will read one last story from r/petty revenge. This is a very satisfying story that is titled "Downstairs Neighbor Threatens Me, so I remind them it's not a good idea to pick a fight with someone who controls your ceiling space." So I am on my balcony in an apartment doing a 10-minute craft project, and my downstairs neighbor storms out 2 minutes into some light hammering on my parts at 6 PM to yell obscenities at me, threaten to beat my ass, and end with threatening to call the cops. I yelled back a few times that it'd only be a minute, but she was just not reasoning with me. So when I wrapped up, I moved my subwoofer to the floor, adjusted some innocent settings, and played Corpse at a very reasonable volume. The whole floor was vibrating until quiet hours every day until I am done laughing at my own joke. Tomorrow I'll be going to the office to turn them in for smoking on their porch and throwing cigarette butts where people, including me, walk their dogs, poisoning hazard after all, and the smoke gets in my house too. I have not said anything because I'm not a narc, but don't start no thing won't be no thing. And yeah guys, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I will see you again tomorrow.